Hey, everybody, this is Josh for another episode of the podcast. I am very happy to be joined by ElsaMarie. ElsaMarie, thank you very much for coming on the show. Can you start by telling us a little bit more about who you are and what is the business that you're building these days?
Hi, Josh. Thank you for having me on your show. Hi, everybody. Good morning from Washington, D.C. So, I'm ElsaMarie D'Silva, and I'm the founder of Red Dot Foundation and Red Dot Foundation Global. They are two nonprofits, one in India and one in the USA, which works on sexual and gender based violence. So, Josh, I started on this journey about 12 years ago after a horrific incident that took place in my country, in Delhi, the capital city of India. A young woman was gang raped on a bus after watching a movie, and she was on her way back home. And she and her male friend boarded this bus with a few people on it, not realizing that they were all part of a gang. And they went on to assault her and insert, all kinds of things into her body and then left her on the streets to die. That incident, as you can imagine, made international news, and there were protests, demonstrations all over the country. I was triggered to remember my own experiences of being harassed on the streets, at the workplace, etc. And I realized that I had not made any official complaint or even spoken about it. And so did my friends. And that led me to believe that there is an institutional data gap that exists, which needed to be bridged. So, 10 days after the gang rape of Jyoti Singh, we launched a platform called Safe City. And that's the basis of our work. It's the core of what we do. We document anonymous incidents of sexual and gender based violence all over the world. And this informs our programming on, trying to understand the different forms of it, helping different people understand their rights in different contexts. So, whether it is at the home, on the streets, at the workplace, what is it that you can do? How can you prevent this violence? And how can you get redressal? So the two nonprofits came later to help us support our work.
Got it. And can you talk a little bit about pulling that trigger to actually get it started? Because as you kind of alluded to, sometimes things happen and maybe there's other things going on in your life or for a wide variety of reasons, we might not kind of take that action right away. In this case, something kind of triggered and within, you said 10 days, you were off to the races. Can you talk a little bit about what it was that actually you guys did to get it started? And maybe if you can also give some advice to the listeners, like maybe some event like this or something, a similar sort of event that gets you thinking, hey, I need to do something. What are the best moves people can take to actually get them off the ground?
So sometimes it seems like in the moment you do things, but I can tell you looking back, and it's only when you look back you can connect the dots, that it was a journey. So I had spent about 20 years in aviation between two of India's largest airlines. And I was at this point in my life when I was looking for my purpose. I'd felt I'd reached my glass ceiling and I wanted to pay it forward on women's rights, but didn't know exactly what aspect to focus on. The whole year, 2012, was an exploration of what that meant. And in December, when this incident with Jyoti Singh happened, I guess it was a catalyst for me to finally zone in on the exact issue, because I'm myself a survivor. And it struck me, coming from a business profile, that, what is the data that we are referring to? How are we planning cities? How are we responding to these incidents? How are we implementing policy if most survivors are not sharing their stories or their incidents? On what basis are we actually designing solutions? And that was what appealed to me, and everything coalesced into that one moment. What helped is open source software. So our first launch of Safe City was on Ushahidi, which is an open source software for crowd mapping. We had heard of a similar initiative in Egypt, and so we styled ourselves on it. They were called Harass Map Egypt, but we customized it to India. And we also wanted it to be a positive name. So Safe City is a very positive name. It's not just pointing to the problem, but, and that's very important to us. We are very solutions oriented and we want people to think of solutions. And it's not only for women. Though we started off with women, we are very pleased to say that over the last 12 years now, our reportees are also men. Of course, the proportion is largely skewed towards women. And we also have some non-binary folks reporting at the moment. So to the listeners out there, if you are passionate about something, do something about it. Don't just go to social media and, become a finger warrior where you put your, do that. That's important to put your opinion out there, get people thinking about it, start the conversations. But it's also important to do something. You don't have to start your own nonprofit or you don't have to launch anything in a big way. But there are many organizations out there who you can volunteer with, who you can start helping out with so that you can learn more about the issue. I can tell you that when I first started, yes, I am a woman and I have been a survivor, but there's so much that I didn't know. And there was a lot of unlearning, relearning, and learning that had to take place for me to get to where I am now. And I still feel I'm still learning so much about this issue. We stand on the shoulders of giants. There's been a lot of work done, and you can build on that work. So feel
Hmm.
free to take action because every one of us has to step up to make the world a better place.
Yeah, that's great advice. And also just the fact that you got to start somewhere, right? But in most cases, the snowball starts small, but it's only by starting to push it that it can get bigger and bigger. Can you talk a little bit about how big the organization is right now? And are you seeing a lot of room for growth in the industry?
So, sexual and gender based violence is a global pandemic. And since we recently went through a pandemic, we know what that means, how huge that problem is, right? Just to give you an idea, what UN Women says is 1 in 3 women on an average around the world experience some form of sexual assault at least once in their lifetime. But in my
Wow.
opinion, it's like close to 90% of women experience some of it, except that they may not know. They may not have vocabulary for their incidents. They may not know their rights. They may not want to report or break the silence around them. So the problem is huge. There's scope for everyone to do something about it and more organizations to come together and form a coalition. Red Dot Foundation, my India nonprofit, yesterday completed 10 years. We are a team of 20 in India, and the US nonprofit, I'm currently fundraising to set up the team. I have 3 colleagues, one based out of New York and 2 based out of Brazil. And yes, we are lean and mean, but we try to get a lot done.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Can you talk about, so let's say somebody's listening to this and they can relate in the sense that they have an idea or a situation or a kind of like a trigger point where they're listening and saying, you know what, I do want to get started. What would you say are 5 key steps somebody could take to get something similar off the ground?
If you're passionate about an issue, and especially sexual and gender based violence, first, learn more about the topic. Since there is a silence around it, and not many people in your ecosystem may be talking about it, first go to the internet and research. You can come to reddotfoundation.in website and also check out, some of our material. We have a lot of toolkits. And there's all forms of sexual violence. So there's nonverbal, verbal, physical, and now digital forms of violence in public spaces, in private spaces, in physical and in digital spaces. So upskill yourself. I think it's very important that you do so, not just if you're a survivor, but also as a bystander. So many people silently witness these incidents, but don't do anything about it. The second one is find a local organization to support because, nonprofits work on very meager resources and the problem is so big for any one of us to solve. So we need all the help that we can get. The third is start talking to your family and your friend circle. Start small. with people immediate to you so that you can find out if any one of them is a victim or a survivor and do they need support. Don't push any support to them. Offer a patient ear, listen actively, and offer whatever help that they need when they need it. It's their choice and they must give you the consent. Consent is a large part of it. So I would say the fourth one is understand your biases and also understand consent so that you know that you are not, you know, crossing boundaries yourself and becoming a perpetrator. And lastly, I would say try to build trust with your institutional service providers. What I mean with that by that is police, city officials, transport officials. We don't really get involved in these things, right? We vote. Right now, I'm in the US and tomorrow is election day. And in India, every 5 years we go and vote. This year, for example, 75 countries, I think, went to the polls or are going to the polls. And we take that seriously, or hopefully we take that seriously. But a democracy means you actively engage on a daily basis. And Safe City as a platform allows you to do that because you can see the data at your neighborhood level. So use that data to go to your police and start having a dialogue on what is showing up in your neighborhood and what kind of solutions can be, designed with the community and with the institutional stakeholders, because it will take everybody to make the world a safer place.
Absolutely. And I'm thinking about too, as you're talking, just because of the content that we tend to focus on this channel is more like for-profit business, is pretty much all of that could be translated to like a for-profit business, right? Kind of learning, doing market research, consent, you can kind of relate to like purchases and, payments and stuff like that. So I'm definitely seeing a lot of connections there as well, which could be very helpful.
And,
What would you
and
say?
if I may,
Yeah.
I don't particularly think there's much difference between a for-profit and a non-profit business except the tax structure.
Hmm.
It's the
For
vehicle
sure.
to do your work and also the output. We produce a social impact, right? Which may not be easily translatable to the normal public in terms of money. But if you were to, and there's research done with our data and also by other groups, you can put an economic cost to sexual harassment in public spaces. In India, a
Hmm.
research paper actually valued it at $300 per year, which is almost 1 month's salary in India, where a woman would upgrade to what she thinks is a safer means of transport. That's huge. So if you can put an economic cost to your work that you're doing, you're no different from the for-profit, because you are creating value which has financial impact.
Absolutely. What would you say was the hardest part of starting this organization and getting it off the ground?
The hardest part, is actually getting women to break their silence. We've had so much of social conditioning to not talk about it, to grin and bear it, society blames us often for what happens. And you can hear the discourse in the US also around reproductive health and rights, right? So it's always a woman's fault, when in reality it's not. It's societal norms and culture that has allowed a place for violence to perpetrate within that community. And we have to break all those shackles, including the ones in our mind. And I think getting women to break their silence has been the hardest part, but we are getting there. We have more conversations. It doesn't help when leaders in power promote misogyny, sexism, and continue to erode our rights. But nevertheless, I think there is an uprising all over the world where women are stepping up. Brave women are coming forward, sharing their stories. One great example is the lady in France, Giselle Pellicot, who, was raped for so many years by her own husband and many men in the town. And now she's chosen to reveal herself as the survivor in the court proceedings. And she has just opened up the space for other survivors to come forward and share their stories. So I think brave women around the world are stepping up, and we are going to have more women reclaim their agency. But it was the hardest thing. My previous job, just before starting Safe City, was Vice President Network Planning, where I planned the route network for one of India's largest airlines. And I had to optimize 500 daily flights. Now think of that as a piece of cake. And this being the most difficult task I've ever had.
That's a very enlightening answer for sure. And then my second last question, ElsaMarie, is what's one key piece of advice? Maybe there's folks listening right now, they're thinking about whether it's an organization like yours or a for-profit or some other type of not-for-profit. What's the one key piece of advice you'd give to people out there right now?
Just do it. My mother always said, just do it. If you're really passionate about something, try it out. Do it in small bits and pieces, but do it with commitment. So sometimes you have a job and you have an idea for a business, like another friend of mine. And I told her, don't quit your job, because sometimes the job offers you financial stability. As an entrepreneur, the one thing that you don't have is financial stability. It's very rare that an entrepreneur starts their business and is profitable from day one or month one or one. It takes about 3 to 5 years to establish yourself and your, cash flows and stuff like that. So if you don't have that financial nest egg, it might be difficult for you to quit your job and invest in this completely. But you can do it on the side. But when you do it, even if you're putting in 1 hour, 3 hours a day, do it with commitment, do it with strategy, do it with a plan, and think ahead. Don't only think of the short term.
That's great advice and a great note to end on. ElsaMarie, thank you so much for coming on the show. If people do want to learn more about you or the organization, where do you recommend that they go?
You can write to me, Elsa, ELSA, Red, RED.foundation.org. So it's very simple, elsa@red.org.
Awesome. And we'll have links to the websites as well, just if people want to take a look and learn more about them. ElsaMarie, thank you again for coming on the show. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Josh. I really had fun talking to you.
Likewise.